But barely a week goes by without the BBC's impartiality being called into question. Today, Gary Lineker has claimed he helped to draw up the BBC social media guidelines, the ones which now give him much more freedom, his words, to post his political views. I'm joined now on the phone by former Top Gear presenter, Mr. Steve Berry. Steve, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, Mike. I'm just wondering as well, you know I like my fast motorbikes and my fast cars.
Yes.
I'm wondering if, when they think about revising the speed limits, they could have a word with me, because I've got some ideas.
Yeah,
They might be a bit radical, like 150 mile an hour on the motorway. But, you know...
Are you serious?
I mean, why are they asking someone he's a freelancer, he's not even part of the BBC, which he's told us over and over again, which of course is why he can go off and do all the other lucrative gigs that he does apart from presenting Match of the Day, by preserving his freelance status.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, of course, this all came out as a result of a kind of media gathering that was organised just this week for a select few people. And Nicole Lampert was one of the people that went along. And she's, I think, a freelance writer as well, but she happens to be also a campaigner on behalf of Israel, given what's going on in Gaza and what happened on October the 7th. And she wanted to ask him all about his tweets, and she wanted to ask him particularly about why he hadn't bothered in any way, shape or form to mention the hostages that have been taken, why he never really tweeted on October the 7th about what actually happened that horrible day in Israel when they were attacked by thousands and thousands of mass terrorists. And so this all came out as a result of that. And he explained to her, basically, that he had a hand in designing the new guidelines, which I find staggering. Because if Tim Davie, the Director General, is supposed to be trying to kind of, rein him in, what the hell is he doing, inviting him to construct the very rules that would probably be the things that he would break?
What they should have done is said, yeah, we got Gary in, we put him in a room, we let him speak for an hour, we recorded it, and then we decided to do the exact opposite of everything that he said. He's got the advantage for Gary Lineker is, of course, he can give his opinions, he can make his suggestions, but he has no consequences, he has no responsibility, no executive responsibility. When I left the BBC, I went on the other side of the camera, working as a producer and a director, and I had a duty of care to the people who worked underneath me and with me, and I had to abide by producer guidelines. Mike, have you ever seen producer guidelines? It's like, it's just that, honestly, if you dropped it on your foot, you'd be waiting 5 hours in an HSQ at A&E, honestly.
Well, exactly right. But this is the thing.
I mean, it's none of those responsibilities. He can just mouth off and there are no consequences for him. He's in a perfect position. I was thinking today about the man that went before him, Des Lynam. Now, I've mentioned him before. I met Des a couple of times, and I know two things about Des. One, boxing was his first love, not football. But two, he was a massive fan of Brighton and Hove Albion. Like most people, I have absolutely no idea about his politics. He could be as red as a postbox, or he could be as, as blue as the skies in Florida. I have no idea, because that man just spoke about what he was paid to speak about. He didn't feel the need to shove his political opinions down our throat. So when you were watching him, you could just enjoy the football and not sit there thinking, I suppose he knows a bit about football, but he's a terrible one or the other. But Gary Lineker, for me, one of the great things about the BBC, I'm not here to bash the BBC, I don't particularly like doing that. It seems terrible to me what's happening. I don't celebrate it in any way. But what it used to do, I think, so well, and I think the death of Ian Lavender this week has brought that into focus, because Dad's Army it wasn't just a TV show. That's why that guy's still famous 40 years after it went off the air. That's why people in the street would shout, "Don't tell him, Pike," every single day of his life, because it brought the nation together. And that's what the BBC did so well. And that's what Gary Lineker and people like him do not understand. I don't think he's a bad man. I really don't. But I just don't think he understands the consequences of his constant divisive commentary.
Well, that is it, Steve, isn't it? The point is that, you may not want to bash the BBC, but they're doing a pretty good job of bashing themselves, because in the end, with every utterance that comes from Gary Lineker's X account or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, he plunges another dagger into the kind of the freedom that the BBC has to report on things, to have opinions within the organisation, to have interesting programming, because all that Gary Lineker does is basically snub his nose at these guidelines, because he's broken every single one of them. Now, I don't believe that he will be able to carry on without breaking more. But every time he does break them, they seem to make another excuse. You know, he's already broken the one that says you shouldn't attack individuals. He's already broken the one that says that you should stay in your lane and you shouldn't comment on anything which is outside your sphere of expertise, which in his case is football. They say also that he's not supposed to be taking on issues of policy when it comes to government, which he's already broken as well. So I don't believe that somehow he's going to stay outside of this new constructed world that he's helped to frame.
But here's the thing, Mike. You think to yourself, well, OK, say the BBC, say Tim Davies says, we've had enough, mate. Sorry, this isn't working out. You're clearly not abiding by the agreement that we put in place to make sure this sort of thing didn't happen again. If he went to Sky or ITV, are they any different to the BBC these days, Mike?
Well, I would imagine if you went to one of those...
I ask you, are they?
Well, they're probably not in terms of how woke they are, but they are different in the sense that they're not funded by the taxpayer. And that's always been my problem with him. I don't really mind if he's got opinions. I don't really mind whether he shares those opinions. But when he's working for the BBC, which have set guidelines, which he's not supposed to override, then he can't do it. It's as simple as that. And if he really wants to show that he's got all sorts of opinions that he wants to share, then leave the bleeding BBC and get a job in the commercial sector where they might give him a different contract or they might not.
Well, they would give him a different contract because, as you and I both know, because we both worked in that sector for a long time, once the commercial imperatives there, you have to worry about what Kellogg's or the Ford Motor Company or Pfizer or Procter & Gamble, what they think, when you have to worry about what they think of all your pious pronouncements.
Yes.
All of a sudden you start to get a different attitude.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Before we let you go, Steve, let's talk about one of your favourite subjects, and that's the car business. Electric cars, apparently, are not all they're cracked up to be, according to just not one man, Rowan Atkinson, but also according to the Advertising Standards Authority, who've now today said you can't claim that they've got zero emissions because it isn't true. But what do you make of Rowan Atkinson basically being blamed for the fall?
He's being blamed.
Well, he's being blamed because he put out he wrote a piece, I think, in the Telegraph a while back, where he said, you know, it's not true to say that these cars are free from emissions because they get loads of emissions when they're being made, loads of emissions when you're charging them, loads of emissions for all sorts of things that you have to repair on them. And so it's complete fallacy. And he actually said, if you really want to get a decent electric car, you should wait a while because they're not that good.
Yeah, well, it's like my dad, when we were kids, me and my brother called him Inspector Gadget. My dad was he's 84 today. Happy birthday, Alan Berry, 84 today.
Right, brilliant.
He was in hospital for 3 months when he was born because that winter, 1940, was the worst winter this country's ever seen. And they talk about bloody climate change.
Oh,
anyway,
really? Yeah.
It was 3 months at the maternity hospital. He was stuck there. But anyway, we were talking about this today, and how they blame Rowan Atkinson for basically saying, expressing an educated opinion. No, Rowan Atkinson's been a car man, a gearhead all his life.
Totally.
He's one of Britain's best respected classic racers. But they were saying, Mr. Bean puts a spoke in the wheels of the electric car. You think, oh, come on. Folk don't want these electric cars, Mike. I'll tell you why. They're too expensive. There were 2 hours of sod all. I nearly said something else.
Yeah.
As soon as you drive them out of the showroom, they don't, for me, the looks of them, they're still trying to make it, I don't know, I don't think they've made a sexy looking electric car yet.
No.
And there are all kinds of reasons. And at the end, and they don't make a noise. They don't make there's all kinds of reasons why people don't want them. But I think they remove the imperative or the benefits, the loans, the grants, whatever, far too soon. And they just said, you're on your own now, that's how much they are.
Right.
And people just said, right, well, if that's how much they are, I don't want one.
No. And they're not reliable enough. They're not long range enough. You can't take them everywhere because you might not find somewhere to charge them. It's just, you know, it's all a bit of a con, really. But more virtue signalling for the eco-nutters.
Mike, I've just got back from the world's greatest classic car show, and it pains me a bit to say that it's in Paris. Retro Reveal in Paris, the greatest car. One of the stands in there, a British car dealer, he had £200 million worth of cars on his stand, including a McLaren F1, which, of course, famously, Rowan Atkinson previously had.
Yeah.
Not one single car in that hall was electric, and 175,000 people trooped through the doors over 5 days to look at them.
I mean, amazing.
Nobody's ever going to feel about electric cars the way that those people feel about the cars were in that hall in Paris last week. It's just not going to happen.
Exactly.
We don't want them. And in the end, I'm afraid what's going to happen is they're going to make us have them.
Well, they're not going to make me have one, I can tell you that, Steve. I'll be the last man on the parapet fighting them off. But thank you very much indeed. Steve Berry there reporting into us on the latest nonsense from Gary Lineker and the BBC.